Well, we all know already about the Hunter Biden pardon, and we've spoken briefly about the rumors floating around D.C. about a preemptive pardon for people like Liz Cheney, Fauci, Adam Schiff. Kind of an interesting development. Joining me now to talk about that and other things, Mike Benz, Executive Director of the Foundation for Freedom Online. Okay, Mike, first of all, I want to talk about this backdated pardon because you are such a wealth of information on this. Everyone by now realizes it was backdated to start right before Hunter Biden started his work for Burisma in Ukraine. And what is staggering to most people is how many of the Biden roads lead to Ukraine, which is where we, of course, are spending a fortune to defend right now. Talk about that.
Well, it's incredible. I mean, the fact is this is the most expansive pardon, as I understand it, in U.S. history. 11 years, get out of all crimes free card. It's for all crimes charged and uncharged, which means Hunter Biden could have committed an act of murder anytime in the last 11 years, in theory, and can't be charged for it. The fact is. This starts in January 2014. The coup in Ukraine kicked off in March 2014. The counter coup, where the eastern side of Ukraine broke away, happened the following month. The month after that, Hunter Biden joins the board of Burisma. And then, the fact is Burisma was being used as an instrument of statecraft by the U.S. in order to pry Russia off of the European gas market. The whole point of the company, in terms of why it was being backed by 5 different federal capacities. I mean, think about this, right? Burisma was being supported by U.S. aid. Okay, U.S. aid is supposed to be our humanitarian aid to nonprofit organizations. Wink, wink. And it's funding a for-profit private sector gas company in Ukraine. It's being supported by the State Department. The Hunter Biden's law firm drew up a memo requesting help from the State Department and pitching itself as a bulwark against Russian gas. You had the Pentagon and the State Department funding the Atlantic Council. They fund over $1 million each to the Atlantic Council. The Atlantic Council has 7 CIA directors on its board of directors. The Atlantic Council had a formal deal, a cooperation agreement signed with Burisma on January 19th, 2017. That is one day before Trump was inaugurated into term 1. Also, the Atlantic Council is NATO's think tank. So you basically have NATO, the State Department, the Pentagon, and USAID all backing Burisma. And then you had, obviously the murky role of the CIA itself, which is something that I have been suggesting very loudly for a very long time. Obviously, the CIA can't come out and say it, but the CIA waived the IRS off of Hunter Biden's sugar daddy. The CIA has been assisting the State Department with its long-range plan to win the energy market in Europe, or at least to pry Russia off of it. Hunter Biden was on the chairman's advisory board of NDI, the National Democratic Institute, which is effectively the CIA wing of the DNC. Oh, and by the way, remember the other board of director who was sort of notorious, who also joined Burisma that year, was Cofer Black. Cofer Black, who had spent 30 years in the CIA, won a CIA Distinguished Medal Award, and was Mitt Romney's Sherpa to the intelligence community, was on the board of directors of Burisma right next to Hunter Biden. And so, the issue is the best way to find all this stuff out is through prosecutions, because prosecutions give you unfettered access to investigations. And the prosecution is the only reason the CIA had to step in to stop the investigation into Hunter's financing sources. So what's the best way to shut down a prosecution and therefore an investigation into the diplomatic octopus arm of the U.S. government's involvement in the seedy dealings of Burisma and in Ukraine? Well, you issue a blanket pardon to the Where's Waldo figure who's running through all the different pages of this story so that you can't sic the Justice Department on an investigation because there's no underlying crime because there's a get out of all crimes free pass.
Jeez. So you think Hunter Biden in this blanket pardon, you think all the powers that be probably view Hunter Biden as the choke point hatch that as long as they seal it, the other compartments of the vessel won't go down to the bottom of the ocean. That sounds like what you're saying to me.
I think definitely one of the main ones. I mean, I think we're going to see James Biden and other people who run through the Garrett Ziegler, Marco Polo picture book, a very colorful picture book, I should note. I think that you may see other key figures from that as well get blanket pardons, and I think that those will receive far less media fanfare. But Hunter played a very, very unique role, and I can almost see why he turned to crack cocaine. This must have been unbelievably stressful, all the things that he was managing for the Biden crime family. I mean, it was Ukraine, it was Mexico, it was China, and this guy. Remember, one of Hunter's clients in his consulting firm was the head of Chinese intelligence. And meanwhile, through the other side of the Biden family business, he's trying to sell Chinese investors to purchase American LNG ports, liquefied natural gas. He's an equity investor. He owns almost 10% in this, E-Plata, this private microfinancing company to provide banking services for illegal immigrants coming up the border through Mexico, while his father is keeping open the border and then issuing a Justice Department edict to threaten banks if they don't provide banking services for illegal immigrants. I mean, this guy must have been managing so many different crooked projects, so many different need to know, special compartmentalized things of what story to tell the family, what story to tell the investors, what story to tell the government, what story to tell the press. It's almost enough to make you turn to drugs and hookers.
Oh, Lee. Okay, let's switch gears here and talk about the preemptive pardons for people like Fauci, Liz Cheney, Adam Schiff. Can you help me understand why that would be necessary? And I know they've done a bunch of things we don't like, and to say they committed crimes would be obvious to me, but have they committed crimes you think that they should be pursued for? What's this about?
Well, this Justice Department under Merrick Garland has been awfully creative about finding crimes and stretching the limits of creativity to find creative ways to charge their political enemies. I mean, I think everybody saw that in right out the gate with the Douglas Mackey case, where it was trial by meme. You saw the unbelievable creativity to prosecute Trump himself. You saw the KKK Act, the Ku Klux Klan Act, is what was invoked in order to prosecute Donald Trump. You had these really creative concepts around deprivation of rights. You're basically arguing that it's effectively a kind of RICO crime to work together with multiple people to deprive Americans of access to rights granted to them under the Constitution. That is unbelievably broad when you squint and think about it. If you have a malicious prosecutor who's willing to dip into that and not care about the institutional blowback in terms of the reputation of the Justice Department, you could, from Biden's perspective, I could see hundreds of crimes with all those individuals that would, fit that bill. I mean, think about when you're talking about Fauci. I mean, we now have the Republican-controlled Congress, an official report saying their conclusion on the basis of a years-long investigation is that COVID-19 was created by Tony Fauci. I mean, in so many words, right? I mean, think what they said is created. It was a man-made because of gain-of-function research that resulted in a lab leak from the Wuhan lab. Well, everyone knows the Wuhan lab story runs through Ralph Barrick and the North Carolina lab and the USAID funding and the DARPA grants and that sort of weaving from the Rocky Mountain lab into North Carolina, and then the partnerships that American universities and American research centers doing this government-funded gain-of-function research had with the Wuhan lab. So the fact is, they said, the official position of the House of Representatives is Tony Fauci's gain-of-function research, which Tony Fauci, remember, perjured himself in Congress. Remember, Tony Fauci said, "Oh, we don't do gain-of-function." This was the big fight between Rand Paul and Tony Fauci. But just like James Clapper, when James Clapper lied about not the NSA not doing bulk surveillance, and nobody could call him on it at the time because Edward Snowden hadn't yet leaked highly classified NSA documents. But then once the leak came out, James Clapper was not charged with perjury. Well, that's because of the politics of it. Nobody wanted to take on the intelligence community at the time or suffer the diplomatic blowback of disgracing a major U.S. intelligence official. I think Tony Fauci has had that cloak of protection force field to date, with an HHS run by Bobby Kennedy, who I should note, his best-selling book is called The Real Anthony Fauci, with Jay Bhattacharya at the NIH, who was called a fringe epidemiologist by Fauci and company, and with so much of the base fired up about seeking justice for Fauci's potential crimes against humanity, that force field may run out. And frankly, a mere charge of perjury is a slap on the wrist when you consider the sheer extent of what he may actually be responsible for. But I think a preemptive pardon is a sort of political way of saying Trump's going to weaponize the Justice Department, so I'm going to protect this good man from the anticipated weaponization while using that as cover to actually bury all of his crimes.
No doubt about it. Mike, thank you, brother. As always, appreciate it. I would thank you for coming to my YouTube channel, but I know how brilliant it is, and I know you love it here. So subscribe and watch. We're going to start really ramping things up and putting some funny stuff, some interesting stuff out there, some collaborations. Either way, my YouTube channel is officially the place to be. So stick around.